The day my daughter uninvited me from her wedding was the same day I decided to let her husband destroy himself. I just had to be patient enough to hand him the shovel. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge, where every secret has a price, every betrayal has a consequence, and justice always finds its way home. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and drop a comment below. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because in this family, you never want to miss what happens next. I want you to picture something. You're sitting in your truck, a 2009 Ford F-250 with a cracked dashboard and a coffee thermos that has absolutely seen better days. And your phone buzzes. It's your daughter, the one you raised alone after her mother, Diane, lost her fight with cancer when Brianna was just 11 years old. The one you worked double shifts for, missed weekends for, ate cold sandwiches standing over a job site sink for, 17 years straight. Just to make sure she never once felt the weight of what was missing. You're already smiling before you even open the message. Then you read it. Dad, Tyler says you're too embarrassing to have at the wedding. Too blue collar. He wants it to be a smaller family thing. Please don't come. I'm so sorry. I read it 3 times. 3 times. The thermos slipped right out of my hand and coffee went everywhere. All over my jeans, all over the seat. And I just sat there, completely soaked, staring at a message that rearranged every single thing I thought I understood about my life. Too embarrassing. Too blue collar. Now let me give you some context. Because this story doesn't work unless you understand exactly who Ray Merritt is. I'm a concrete man. Started Merritt Construction out of the back of that same Ford truck. 2 years ago with a $3,000 loan, 2 employees, and a phone number printed on magnetic door signs. We poured foundations, driveways, commercial slabs, the kind of work nobody ever photographs for a magazine but everybody desperately needs before anything beautiful gets built on top of it. My hands are rough. My boots are always dusty. I eat lunch at the job site most days, and I have never in my life owned a suit that cost more than $200. Tyler Caldwell, Brianna's fiancé, wore a watch to our very first dinner that cost more than my first truck. I didn't hold that against him. Genuinely, I did not. What I held against him was the smirk, that quiet, barely there smirk he'd get whenever I spoke at the dinner table, like I was a golden retriever that had accidentally learned to use a salad fork. But Brianna loved him. So I loved him by extension, because that is what fathers do. I had already written the check, $45,000, the venue deposit, the catering, the florist, the photographer who charged by the hour like he was performing open heart surgery. All of it, paid in full. No hesitation. Because that is what Diane would have done, and somebody had to carry that torch. I called my best friend Calvin the second I could speak again. I said, and I want you to hear the exact, unnatural steadiness in my voice when I said this, because it frightened even me. Calvin, she uninvited me from the wedding. Silence on the line. Then, come again? Brianna. Tyler told her I'm too blue collar, too embarrassing. I'm not invited to my own daughter's wedding, Calvin. The one I just wrote a $45,000 check for. Another silence. Longer. Ray. Yeah. Tell me you're pulling my leg right now. I really wish I was, brother. I heard him exhale slowly, the way Calvin does when he's working very hard not to say something that cannot be unsaid. Then, what are you going to do? And here is the moment. Here is the exact pivot point that every single thing after this hangs on. Because most men in my position, most fathers, most good and decent and chest-cracking open with grief fathers, would have called Brianna back immediately, would have cried, would have driven to her apartment and stood on the porch until she came outside. I didn't do any of that. I took a long, slow sip of what little coffee was left in my thermos, and I said, I'm going to call the resort, to talk to them, to cancel everything. The silence that followed was so thick I could have poured it into a foundation mold. Ray, every single thing. Calvin, the venue, the catering, the flowers, the photographer, all of it. If I'm not good enough to sit in the front row, I'm certainly not good enough to fund the fairy tale. They are going to lose their minds. That, I said, is the idea. Now before you judge me, and I know some of you already are, I can feel it through the screen. Understand something. I didn't cancel that wedding purely out of spite. I canceled it because somewhere underneath the grief and the humiliation, a quiet and steady voice in my head that sounded exactly like Diane said, let them feel the weight of what they threw away. So that is precisely what I did. the resort coordinator, a very professional woman named Sandra who absolutely did not deserve the phone call she received that Thursday afternoon. Confirmed the cancellation with the careful, neutral composure of someone who had navigated this kind of situation before and had no interest in taking sides. Brianna called 40 minutes later. I let it ring. She called again and again. Then Tyler called, the first time he had ever dialed my number directly, and I stared at his name on my screen like it was written in a language I no longer spoke. I let that ring too. Then the text came from Brianna. Dad, what did you do? The resort says everything is canceled. Please call me back. Please. I typed back 4 words. Family only. Remember? They got married at the courthouse on a Thursday morning. I know because Calvin told me that evening. He called around 7, voice careful the way voices get when someone is delivering news they aren't sure how you'll receive. He said, Ray, I heard from Mara. It happened today. I was sitting at my kitchen table when he said it. The same table where Diane and I used to eat Sunday breakfast. The same table where I had sat with Brianna 17 years ago helping her with 3rd grade math. The same table where I had eaten alone every morning since Diane passed and told myself that was fine. I said, okay. Calvin said, Beverly Caldwell showed up to the courthouse in a full-length cream gown, like she was storming Normandy in formal wear. I almost laughed. I really did. But I was looking at the empty chair across from me. The one Brianna used to sit in. The one that still had a small scratch on the left armrest from the time she dragged it across the floor when she was 9 years old, and I had told her to stop doing that, and she had done it one more time anyway, just to see what would happen. That scratch had always made me smile. That evening it just looked like a mark left by someone who wasn't there anymore. I said, Thanks for telling me, Calvin. He said, You going to be all right? I looked around that kitchen. The dented thermos on the counter, the hook by the door where Brianna's old jacket used to hang before she took it when she moved out, the 2 coffee mugs in the cabinet because I had never gotten around to moving the second one even though there was nobody to use it. I said, I'm fine. I wasn't fine, but I kept my word to myself. I did not chase her. Diane used to say, and I can still hear her voice clear as any Thursday morning, she used to say, Ray, you cannot want someone's healing more than they want it for themselves. So I waited. 18 months. That is how long the silence lasted between Brianna and me. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It hurt like a missing tooth. You're not bleeding. You're functional. But your tongue keeps finding that empty space and reminding you that something which belonged there is simply gone. The worst of it came at Thanksgiving. I had driven to Calvin's as I always did. His wife Patricia's famously dry turkey, football on too loud, enough noise and warmth to fill the spaces where the quiet would otherwise live. Calvin's 3 kids ran through the house. Patricia kept refilling my plate without asking whether I wanted more. It was good. It was genuinely good. And then Patricia's youngest, 7 years old, gap-toothed, completely unaware she was holding a grenade, looked across the table at me and said, Mr. Ray, where's your daughter? How come she never comes? The table went very quiet. Calvin started to say something. I said, She's busy this year, sweetheart. She sends her love. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her mashed potatoes. I excused myself 10 minutes later and stood in Calvin's backyard in the November cold for about 5 minutes, looking at nothing in particular, until I could trust my face again. I went back inside and ate 2 pieces of pie and watched football, and did not say another word about it for the rest of the evening. That is what 18 months felt like. Not one dramatic moment, just 1,000 small ones. A scratch on a chair, an empty coffee mug, a 7-year-old's innocent question on a Thursday in November. But I kept my word. I did not chase her. In the meantime, I did what I had always done. Showed up to job sites, drank bad coffee, consulted for Vanguard 3 days a week from a modest office that still smelled like sawdust because I had specifically asked them not to renovate it. The young analysts in their fitted suits would walk past my open door, glance in, and I could see them doing the math. Why does this man look like he repairs roofs for a living? I never once corrected the math. Because here is what nobody knew. Not Calvin. Not Brianna. Definitely not Tyler Caldwell and his $1,000 watch. 6 months before that text destroyed my Thursday afternoon, I had received a phone call from a private equity firm based out of Atlanta called Vanguard Capital Group. They wanted to buy Merit Construction, not the equipment, not the client list, the entire operation. Lock, stock, and concrete mixer. We negotiated for 11 weeks. I had a lawyer, A good one, the kind with a corner office and a firm handshake and absolutely no magnetic signs on his car. And at the end of those 11 weeks, I signed papers that turned 20. 2 years of dusty boots and cold sandwiches and missed weekends into $11 million. $11 million. I stayed on as a consultant, kept showing up to job sites, kept wearing the same boots, kept driving the F250 with the cracked dashboard because honestly it runs perfectly fine and I was not about to become somebody I'm not just because my bank account changed area codes. Nobody knew. I liked it that way. I liked being the simple guy, the blue-collar embarrassment, the father who had paid for a wedding he wasn't allowed to attend. Because here is what 22 years of pouring concrete teaches you about people. You learn everything about a man's character when he thinks he is standing on solid ground. And Tyler Caldwell had absolutely no idea what was underneath him. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe to Sweet Family Revenge. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely. Then, one Friday afternoon, Calvin called. You are not going to believe this, he said, and the way he said it, half laughing, half horrified, told me to sit down before he continued. I sat down. Tyler Caldwell just registered a construction company. I held the phone completely still. Come again. Caldwell Development Group. Filed the paperwork 3 weeks ago, apparently. Commercial foundations. Industrial slabs. Calvin. He married my daughter, took my wedding money, uninvited me from the ceremony, and now he is copying my exact business model. Ray, I'm calm. You don't sound calm. That is because I am extremely calm, and it is unsettling even me. Now here is where I need you to stay with me, because this is the part where most people would expect rage, would expect a furious phone call to Brianna, would expect some kind of dramatic confrontation in somebody's driveway. But I remembered what I told Calvin the day I canceled that wedding. Let them feel the weight of what they threw away. The shovel was already in Tyler's hands. I just needed to watch him dig. The call came on a Wednesday. I was eating a gas station sandwich. Genuinely, completely unironically, a gas station sandwich. Because old habits die hard. When my cell rang from a number I didn't recognize. Atlanta area code. I answered. Mr. Merritt? Speaking. This is Tyler Caldwell, Brianna's husband. The sandwich went down slowly. I know who you are, Tyler. A pause. The kind of pause that tells you someone rehearsed the beginning of a conversation, but not the middle. Sir, I'll get right to it. I've launched a construction company and I'm looking for serious seed investment. I've run the projections, the market analysis is strong, and I believe this represents a significant opportunity for the right. Another pause, shorter this time. Surprised? I'm sorry? I leaned back in my truck, same F250, same cracked dashboard, and I looked out at the gas station parking lot, and I thought about Diane, about cold sandwiches, about 17 years of double shifts, about a text message that said "to blue collar." Then I thought about $11 million sitting very quietly in a very unsentimental bank account. Send me the business plan, I said. The exhale on the other end of that line was so relieved it was almost uncomfortable to listen to. Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Genuinely. I know things between you and Brianna have been. Send me the business plan, Tyler. He sent it that evening. I forwarded it immediately to Calvin with one line of text. Tell me what you see. Calvin called back within the hour, practically vibrating through the phone. Ray, this business plan is, and I say this with absolute sincerity, spectacular. I know. Like genuinely well constructed. The market projections are realistic. The cost breakdowns are thorough. The 5-year model is, Calvin, I know. Sat with her at the kitchen table 3 weekends straight. Walked her through every single line. Silence. So this isn't Tyler's business plan. What gave it away? Ray. The formatting, the margin structures, the exact way the 5-year projection is laid out. That is my methodology, Calvin. Word for word, she wrote this plan. He just put his name on the cover page. The silence that followed had its own gravitational pull. What are you going to do? And here is the part that still surprises me when I think back on it. I was not angry, not at Brianna, because I understood exactly what that business plan meant. It meant my daughter, somewhere inside those 18 months of silence, had been quietly trying to build a bridge back to me. Not with an apology, not with a phone call, but with the only language she knew I would respect without question: work. She had handed Tyler my methodology like a peace offering that neither of them could fully explain. Tyler thought he was walking into a room with a blue-collar embarrassment who'd been flattered into writing a check. He had no idea what room he was actually walking into. "I'm going to take a meeting," I told Calvin. "With Tyler?" "With both of them. Brianna is going to be there. If Tyler is smart enough to bring her. And if that business plan is any indication, he's smart enough to bring her." The meeting was at a coffee shop in Midtown. Tyler's suggestion. Neutral territory, I assumed he figured. Public enough that nobody raises their voice. He didn't know I had never raised my voice in a negotiation in my life. I don't need to. When you pour the foundation, you don't need to yell at the building to stand up straight. I got there early, ordered black coffee, sat with my back to the wall, the way Calvin always teases me about "you're not in a Western, Ray," and I watched the door. They walked in together. And I won't lie to you. Seeing Brianna walk through that door, 18 months older, a little tired around the eyes, wearing the exact nervous smile her mother used to wear when she knew a difficult conversation was coming, nearly cracked something open in my chest that I had worked very hard to keep sealed. She saw me and stopped walking for just half a second. Half a second. But I saw it. And in that half second I thought about a scratch on a chair armrest, about a gap-toothed 7-year-old asking an innocent question at a Thanksgiving table, about standing in Calvin's backyard in November cold until my face was trustworthy again. 18 months of that. And now she was 5 feet away. Tyler put his hand on her lower back and guided her forward with the easy confidence of a man who had no idea he was walking his wife directly into the most consequential meeting of their lives. They sat down. Tyler ordered something with 4 words in the name. I didn't catch all of them. "Mr. Merritt," Tyler began, extending his hand across the table with the full confidence of a man who has never once questioned his own welcome. "I really appreciate you making the time for this." I shook his hand. Firm. Brief. "Brianna," I said, looking past him. She looked at her coffee cup. "Hi, Dad." 2 words, barely above a whisper, and just like that, 18 months dissolved into something that didn't have a name yet. Not forgiveness. Not resolution. Just presence. We were in the same room again. After everything. After the courthouse and the Thanksgiving and Calvin's backyard and every scratch on every chair. That was something. I turned back to Tyler. "Walk me through the plan." He straightened, launched into it with the rehearsed confidence of someone who has practiced in front of a mirror more than once. And he was good. I will give him that. Polished. Articulate. He knew the numbers because Brianna had given him the numbers. But here is what Tyler Caldwell had never learned. What no amount of mirror practice can ever teach you. When you are sitting across from the man who built the blueprint you are selling, you had better know every single nail in it. I let him finish. Then I leaned forward, put both elbows on the table, and I asked him one question. 1. Tyler, how do you calculate load variance on a commercial slab pour when the soil compression report comes back 15% below projection? The silence was instantaneous. Total. Like all the air quietly left the room at once. Tyler blinked, opened his mouth, closed it, looked sideways at Brianna in a way that confirmed everything I already knew. Brianna was staring at the table. I watched Tyler's confidence, that extraordinary $1,000 watch 2 blue-collar confidence, drain out of his face in real time like water finding a crack. And I picked up my coffee cup, took a slow sip, and waited. If you've been with Sweet Family Revenge for a while and want these stories to keep coming, it truly helps when you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this community alive and these stories flowing. Thank you, for real. The coffee shop felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had quietly moved 3 feet inward while nobody was paying attention. Tyler cleared his throat, attempted to recover with the kind of smooth, lateral conversational pivot that probably worked beautifully in boardrooms full of people who didn't know concrete from carpet. "Well, that's obviously a highly specific technical scenario. It's page 14 of your business plan," I said quietly. "Risk mitigation. Section 3. You wrote, and I'm quoting directly, soil variance will be managed through standard industry recalibration protocols. I'm asking you what that means. In practice, on an actual job site, with a crew standing there waiting. This time, she didn't look back. She was staring at her coffee like it contained some kind of emergency exit. I'd need to consult with my site manager on something that specific. Tyler said finally, straightening his jacket. Like posture alone could save him. I nodded slowly. Your site manager. Yes. Who you haven't hired yet. We're still in the pre-launch phase. Tyler. I set my coffee cup down, very gently. I'm going to stop you right there and save us all about 40 minutes. The table went completely still. Brianna finally looked up. I know you didn't write this plan, I said. Not accusatory, not cruel, just level. The same voice I use when I'm telling a crew foreman the foundation is off by 2 degrees. Factual, immovable. I know every single methodology in it because I developed it over 20 years. I taught it to Brianna at my kitchen table when she was 19 years old. The margin structures, the projection formatting, the exact risk language in Section 3, that is mine. Which means this meeting isn't really about you. I turned to Brianna. She looked like she was bracing for something structural to give way beneath her. Why didn't you just call me? I asked her. And my voice, I want to be honest with you, my voice came very close to not holding in that moment. 18 months, Brianna. You could have called me any single day of those 18 months. Her eyes filled immediately. Dad, instead you handed him my work and sent him through my door, which tells me you wanted to come back, but didn't know how. I paused. So I'm making it simple. I'm right here. Tyler, to his credit or his complete discredit, depending entirely on your perspective, chose that precise emotional moment to sit up straight and say, Mr. Merritt, with respect, I think we're getting a little off track here. The business opportunity is genuinely strong, and I'd like to keep the conversation. Tyler. Sir, how much do you know about Vanguard Capital Group? He blinked. The Atlanta firm? They're a significant private equity operation. Mid-market acquisitions, construction, infrastructure. I actually looked into them when I was doing my market research. They bought Merritt Construction 18 months ago, I said. Tyler nodded slowly, processing. I heard something about that actually. The owner retired, I think. Took a consulting arrangement. He stopped, and I watched the exact moment it landed. It was something to witness, honestly. Like watching someone solve an equation they hadn't realized they were standing inside of. The color didn't drain from his face, so much as completely rearrange, moving from confident to a very specific shade of pale that I can only describe as recalculating everything. His eyes dropped to my boots, then back up to my face, then to my truck visible through the coffee shop window. The F-250, the cracked dashboard, he started. The owner, I said. Yes. You sold Merritt Construction to Vanguard for $11 million. That is correct. The sounds of the coffee shop suddenly seemed extraordinarily loud. Espresso machines, ambient music, someone laughing 2 tables over at something completely unrelated to the quiet demolition happening at ours. Brianna had both hands pressed over her mouth. Tyler sat very, very still. So when you came to me for $350,000, I continued, keeping my voice perfectly level, you were sitting across from the man whose company a private equity firm valued at $11 million. The blue-collar embarrassment. The man too unsophisticated to sit in the front row at the wedding I personally paid $45,000 for. Tyler. And here, finally, I let just a measured amount of the last 18 months settle into my voice. Not rage, not volume, just weight. The full, unambiguous weight of a man who has been extraordinarily patient for a very long time and is now completely done being patient. I want you to think very carefully about the next sentence that comes out of your mouth. Because I have been quiet. I have been patient. I have let you lead this entire meeting, but we are now at the part of this conversation where I stop being quiet. He closed his mouth. First genuinely smart thing he'd done since he walked through that door. I reached into my jacket and placed a folder on the table between us. Brianna and Tyler both stared at it like it might be breathing. That, I said, is a counter-proposal. Tyler reached for it slowly, opened it, and I watched his eyes move across the first page with the careful, increasingly uncomfortable focus of a man reading his own financial autopsy. Because here is what was inside that folder. Vanguard Capital Group, the firm that owned my company, the firm I consulted for 3 days a week, the firm whose young analysts walked past my sawdust-scented office every Tuesday wondering why I looked like I repaired gutters, had been quietly monitoring the commercial construction market in our region for 8 solid months. They wanted to launch a new regional division. They needed a local operator, someone with deep market knowledge, crew relationships, supplier contacts, Community roots, someone who on paper looked exactly like what Tyler Caldwell was pretending to be. Except, the offer in that folder was not for Tyler. It was structured as a joint venture between Vanguard Capital and a new entity I had quietly registered 4 weeks prior. The exact morning Calvin called me about Caldwell Development Group. The entity was called Merritt Brianna Development LLC, not Merritt Tyler, not Merritt Caldwell. Merritt, Brianna. I watched my daughter read her own name on that cover page, and I watched something happen to her face that I had not seen in 18 months. Something that looked like the specific, overwhelming relief of a person who has been treading water completely alone for a very long time, and has just felt solid ground underneath their feet again. For a fraction of a second, she looked exactly like the 9-year-old who used to drag her chair across the kitchen floor just to see what would happen. "Dad," she whispered. "Your mother would have done the same thing," I said. "Probably taken a little longer to set it up. But same thing." Tyler was still reading, getting deeper into the document, getting to the section my attorney had been specifically instructed to make absolutely unmistakably clear. He found it on page 4, the equity structure. Brianna, 40%. Vanguard, 40%. Ray Merritt Consulting stake, 20%. Tyler Caldwell, 0. He looked up slowly. "I'm not in this," he said quietly. "No," I agreed. "This is my business concept," I said. "Written in my methodology, your name was on the cover page. That is all you contributed. You can't just—" Tyler. And here I let the full, quiet, immovable weight of 22 years of built things enter my voice. "You called me too embarrassing to sit at a table I personally paid for. You copied my life's work, put your name on the cover, and walked it through my door asking for money. And somewhere in between those two things, you forgot the most fundamental rule of construction." I stood up, picked up my coffee. "You never disrespect the man who poured the foundation, because he knows exactly where every crack is." I left $40 on the table for the coffees, walked out to my truck, sat there for exactly 3 minutes. Then my phone rang. "Brianna." I answered on the first ring, first time in 18 months. "Dad." Her voice was completely wrecked. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry. There is no excuse for what I did. I let him convince me that. I don't even know how I let him. Dad, I am so sorry. Baby, stop." And I closed my eyes, pressed the phone against my ear the way I used to when she'd call from college at 11 at night, homesick and pretending she wasn't. "You are my daughter. You are always going to be my daughter." That part was never, not for one single day, in question. She cried for a while. I let her, because some things need to come all the way out before anything new can go in. Then, "The business offer," she said finally, her voice beginning to steady. "Is it real? All of it?" "Those are two completely different addresses." A long, quiet pause. Then she said, very softly, "He's not a good man, Dad. I think I've known that for a long time." I did not say I know, even though I had known since that first dinner with the $1,000 watch and the smirk. I did not say I told you so, even though I had earned the right to say it 3 times over. I just said, "The offer has a 30-day acceptance window. You know exactly where I am." She signed the papers 19 days later, alone. Tyler Caldwell filed for divorce 4 months after that. Once he fully understood that his wife now had access to capital, infrastructure, legal resources, and a father who had quietly become one of the most connected men in regional commercial construction, and that absolutely none of it had a single line with his name attached to it. Last I heard, he was attempting to launch Caldwell Development Group independently. He couldn't secure funding, couldn't establish supplier relationships, kept running directly into a quiet invisible wall that tends to materialize when an entire industry is heard, through various channels the way news travels in tight professional circles. That a certain developer had attempted to plagiarize a business plan and hustle an $11 million contractor for seed money. Word travels in concrete circles. It always does. Merritt Brianna Development broke ground on its first commercial project 14 months after that coffee shop meeting. I was there for the pour. Hard hat. Dusty boots. The same F-250 parked at the edge of the site, with the same cracked dashboard, catching the morning light. Brianna stood right next to me, watching the crew work, and after a while she said, "Mom would have absolutely loved this." "Yeah," I said. "She would have taken all the credit too." Brianna laughed, really laughed. The deep, unself-conscious, coming from somewhere real kind of laugh that sounds like something returning home after a very long time away. I looked out at the fresh concrete spreading across the site, smooth and level and permanent, and I thought about Tyler Caldwell and his $1,000 watch, calling me too blue-collar to deserve a seat in the front row. I thought about $11 million sitting quietly in an unsentimental bank account. I thought about Diane's voice saying let them feel the weight of what they threw away. I thought about a gap-toothed 7-year-old at a Thanksgiving table asking where my daughter was. I thought about standing in Calvin's backyard in November, cold, waiting for my face to be trustworthy again. And then I looked at Brianna, hard hat, dusty boots she'd bought herself, standing exactly where her mother would have stood. And I thought about none of those things anymore. Then I picked up my coffee thermos, same one, still dented, probably always will be, and I took a long, slow sip. Because here is the thing about concrete that nobody ever thinks to tell you. It starts as something you can push around, shape it, redirect it, dismiss it, decide it doesn't belong at your table. But give it time, it becomes the thing that everything else is built on. And nothing, not a courthouse wedding, not $1,000 watch, not a text message that tried its very best to make me feel small. Nothing breaks the foundation. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories on Sweet Family Revenge. And as always, thank you genuinely for being part of this family.